Hey guys, Overlord Prime here, back with another replay review. Anyways, this one's going to be from one of my subscribers named Xanthus, and he submitted this 121 replay on Mountain Pass North Spawn. So, the question he asked me was, could I have done better, or could I have won? So obviously, from those two questions, I know this is a loss. But besides that, let's go look into it. So, Mountain Pass is a little different from most other maps, in that you don't really care too much about the entire matchup because the key matchups are based on two engagements. It's going to be on the northern Mountain Pass, D7, the corner fight, and the other corner fight happening on J3. There's also a potential play through the middle, D5, the bridge play, D5 onto E6, but generally that doesn't happen a lot. So looking at the key tanks that are going to be in these positions, the edges, they're going to be heavy tanks. So if you look at your side, it's going to be a 215B and a Super Conch, very strong DPM tanks, very strong defensive hold down firepower, right? They can push, but mostly if they were to play defensively, they will hold their positions and they will basically win or be unkillable, right? Leading a flank to a stall. An IS-7 here is extremely powerful because it's flexible on a map where speed and HP is very, very good, especially when trying that bridge play or rushing to the south. And the reason why I say this is very good is if you look at the matchup here at Kranvagen, not too fast, really good defensive play here that's possible for the enemy team because, impossible to pen turret, 3-shot autoloader. They have a Super Conch, again, same thing can be said, very strong defensive tank, good APCR round, right, good DPM. But here's their weakness, it's this VK7201. This tank is very, very slow. So the big reason why this is a pretty big issue is if a VK is on the enemy team, and you know this, and he's very slow, there's already a big advantage you can get out of this. This opens up a few plays because they're going to be short one big tank. And this means J3 is not going to be a likely play for their team, especially when it comes to a heavy tank overload, right, where they send all 3 heavies there. So this means if your IS-7 decides to go down to K3, rush across the open into K3, which is a very strong hold down position, he's not going to have much that can contest him, right? Likewise, he can also cross the bridge through the middle, which I said something you don't really want to worry about, but it is a possible play. So an E6 or a K3 rush with your IS-7 on your team gives you a huge, huge advantage because you get strong positions, right? You get early positions, and the punish you have against that is not going to be that high when the enemy's very slow. Now looking at the other matchups, the 121 is pretty solid, good DPM, bad gun depression, which isn't really much of a concern on this map until you reach the end game, where the game is more hilly, right? You play more defensive positions where it's on high ground and you're trying to aim down at the enemy. The UDES is the opposite. It's not good on flat terrain or open ground because it's a very turret-dependent vehicle, right? It wants hold-down positions, but if it does get those hold-down positions, this is a very dangerous defensive vehicle. I would say you have a disadvantage in the tank destroyer department. STRVs are not great on this map because the line of sight you have for key targets is very, very minimal, right? You have maybe the E3 position crossing the enemy side, right, into H5, H6, or the early game. You have maybe C3 on top of your hill shooting across the bridge. The enemy is playing defensive there. And that's pretty much it. There's not many options. There is a defensive play in C3 shooting down to G1 if the enemy pushes the south. But again, in a matchup like this, that's counterintuitive, right, and works against your team. It's anti-synergistic because you have a very fast team that can go to strong positions, which completely counteracts you trying to play a defensive playstyle, right? So the STRV works against this composition. Now, on the other hand, they have a JPE, right? It's bulky, it's strong, right? It can play the front line. This is a pseudo-heavy tank, which gives them +1 vehicles on the front line. This could be very, very bad for your team. You have a Manticore, much better scout than RHM, because RHM on this map doesn't really have enough camo to stay safe on the south spawn. You also have a better spawn for scouts, which is north. Kong GC, good arc, can be very useful versus Batcha Arty, which isn't really that deadly on this because you don't have much shots for the low arc, and the long intradrum hurts you, especially in a map like this where there's a lot of cover right next to you a lot. Most importantly, the other heavy matchup, you have BZ68, E75, M103, right, 3 heavies versus 2 heavies. So that's a little bit concerning for the enemy team because you now have an HP advantage over them. Although your tanks are not too great, right? A BZ and M103, I would just classify them as okay vehicles. E75 is very strong. AE Phase 1 obviously competes against an E75 in terms of strength, right, or power ranking. IS-32, very strong. So they have a very, very nice Tier 9 matchup. Now, the unfortunate part is you do have 3 UDES 16s. Normally, you know, a triple lineup like this is not great simply because you're not diversifying your lineup, right? Having 3 hold down specialty vehicles on your medium lineup isn't necessarily bad on certain maps, but on this one it is. Versus their Centurion 7-1, Char, Leo PTA, and an Udis Mirror, right? So they do have 1 extra medium to counteract your heavy, which is not necessarily good, but they have more versatility, right? They have a versatile spread, an autoloader, a sniper, right, and like a mixed bag Centurion 7-1. So I would say in that regard, their medium matchup is a little more favorable just because they're more flexible. For the lights, EBR 90 and a G-Sor on your side, not too great, especially because the Manticore can spot the crossing, but G-Sor is a very good supplement to that, right? It's a good backup. EBR, you know, it's just an EBR. I would say these tanks don't really do well in this map because very minimal flanking opportunities, right? And this goes for the enemy EBR and their Char. So their Tier 9 lights are going to be relatively useless, where you still have a G-Sor and Manticore that can act as strong spotters early game. So it looks like you're going to be using your standard equipment setup, Vents, V-Stab, Rammer. That's completely fine. Now to start with the early game, I would obviously go to D2, right, and just shoot across. Again, you have a light tank advantage, so early damage here is going to be very, very valuable. Your G-Sor is moving forward. EBR is moving forward. So they are going to the right spots. I don't see any lights going across the A line. Very good for you. There is a position you can use. I don't use it often, but I know it exists. It's up on this rock. If you climb up, you can actually flatten out on top of this and just shoot down. This means you have a higher vantage point to shoot the enemy tanks. They have a Char going middle. You don't have to worry about him spotting you. He has bad view range, so you can just set up safely here. Now, one important thing about this position is you're elevated. So now you have a slightly better shot on the hole. It's not great, but it is much better, right? You're leveraging small advantages here. But the big thing you have to consider here is, I'm going to zoom in. Do you want to go for 1 or 2 shots? The big issue with the 121 is it reloads relatively quick for a 440 damage gun. But the main problem it has is that you're going to have a reload that's a little too long to shoot them twice if you're aiming in the center here. So the considerations you have is, if you're going to shoot 1 or 2 tanks, if you want to shoot once for a clean shot, you aim right here. This open area is much better than the slight hold down they get. It's hard to see here, but there's a slight hold down here. But if they drive out here, you notice how the terrain raises up? They have no safe positions here, right? So if you're aiming here, to me, it's reading as, I want to get 1 shot here and 1 shot over here. That's not going to be good because you're not going to reload fast enough, unless you're using a rammer directive and bond vents, you know, basically stacking everything in your favor, which you're not. And even that would be a very, very tight window. So a better position to aim at is to aim further to the left. And the reason is, if you aim further to the left here, the shot actually becomes worse because they're even more entrenched in a hold down spot. But if you aim here, this allows you to get 1 shot here, reload, and get another shot right here. So it's a 1 iffy potential shot of damage and pretty much a near guaranteed 2nd shot, right? Which means the worst case scenario, you get 1 hit, the best case, you get 2. Whereas if you shoot here, you're not necessarily going to be reloaded for the shot here. So this is, I think, one of the worst crosshair placements you can do. This is if you just want to wait for a good shot here. And if you aim here, right, for your first shot, it allows you to aim a second one in this latter half, right? It may not be the greatest one because they may be fast enough to get to this point, but they're still relatively exposed. So let's see what you do. And the reason why you can aim to the left is, look at your Manticore's position. He's spotting the far angle here. So you aim there. Nice. I would argue that that shot was a little too far to the left, right? Too far to the right. so he didn't get quite the timing. But AE phase 1 is one of the faster tanks that can make the cross, so it was a little bit unfortunate on the particular tank that got spotted there. They have a Kran, AE phase 1, IS-3, all crossed as heavies, and you pretty much know that that's it, right? You know that a Super Conk is definitely going to be about as quick as an IS-3 too, and the fact that he's not lit here means that he's most likely not going this way, so you do have an advantage in knowledge that only one of their tier 10 heavies went this way, but you have two, a Super Conk and an IS-7. Most importantly, you have an Udes setting up at J2 with a phase 1 crossing and your IS-7 holding that phase 1 there. So there is a slight advantage you have here on the south. Once a Super Conk E75 get into position, you're basically going to slowly whittle the south play, right, the south positions. At this point, there's not much you can do. I would have actually gone for that blind fire and that Char. You fire into the bush, but I would have just kept firing that corner, like 1-2, instead of just one hold and then second to the bush. Just a small critique on that. And the way you read this now is, what do you expect out of these engagements? The JPE is most likely not going to cross. He's been spotted over and over again, and he's most likely just holding this corner, probably at this rock on their side. You have an IS-7 holding this side here against a phase 1. Phase 1 is overexposed. He's going to eventually get pushed out by a Super Conk and Udes, poking the hill and poking the main road, just shooting into his side while the IS-7 pressures that corner. So this phase 1 will eventually die. And the IS-7 is able to control K5, K6, right? This is the big reason why this south position is so strong. K3 can watch this lane, and he knows there's nothing poking down this southern path. So what you see here is what you get. A phase 1 holding the rock, a Kran on the hill, IS-3 and Char holding the corner, and nothing crossing because they just going to get lit, right, by the G-Sor especially. And the STRV M103 holding this corner is very, very useful because if they get shot, you know. So this is very, very bad for the enemy team, right, and very good for your team. What this means is you're able to eventually win south. This is how you should be looking at, right? The enemy's team is not going to do well. You're going to eventually win south. And this is the reason why I'm bringing this up is it looks like you're going to go down there. You're already rotating your tank this way, and I would say this is a bad move. This is a very, very bad move. And the reason is if you know your team's going to win the south and you're going south, right, this late into the game, you have to ask yourself not, do they need me on south? It's going to be, what do I do when I get there, right? The two cases that can happen is they need your tank to break through. Obviously, just from what I've seen, they don't need you. They're going to slowly win this no matter what. So the only reason you would go south is if you need to win faster. But the development on the map hasn't reached a point where they need your firepower. So I would consider the south play a wasted effort, because if you do go south to win it, a position you're going to break through, you're going to have to consider what do you do after you win this little southern corner, right? You're going to have to break through the JPE, RHM, and UDES 15/16. Which is not a great position, because if you win south, breaking past that is going to be near impossible. So you're moving into a dead end, right? And all you're doing is you're going to that dead end faster. Instead, you have to consider that the enemy sees this. You know that the Super Conks north, he's platoon with the VK. You have two UDES 16s on the north, which is very, very weak, right? You have a BZ68 in the middle holding this. You can't cross the bridge, obviously, because they're now pressuring the south. So your only play is to play defensive, right? Shooting the south, or getting ready to rotate all the way north to A5 and defending and getting some key shots. But it's very bad for your tank to go north because you have no gun depression. So in this case, the way I would play this is I would camp D3 and be ready to rotate between 3D shots onto the Kran, right? You can shoot the Kran if you sit right here, if he backs up into the hill, if he gets pushed or punished. Right to the point where he backs up. Or you can rotate to C4 and support the BZ68, because the BZ68, whether you like it or not, is actually going to eventually be pushed out. If the enemy breaks north, they're going to start shooting him in the back, and the enemy has a lot of firepower here at G6, G7 that can rotate and kill him. So you want to be centralizing your firepower rather than breaking it off to one side and overmatching, because an overmatch in this situation is unnecessary. And this is especially relevant because your platoon mate is in the IS-7. He should be giving you information if he needs you or not, right? Hey, we need to break this flank. We need to win. And if he's telling you that, then yeah, you should go help. But in this case, I feel like that type of call would be a little bit premature or unnecessary, right? It wouldn't happen. So the Super Conk is pushing the Kran out. The IS-7 is now going to be completely hull down against 3 exposed vehicles that have no hull down cover against him. So he's going to punish the crap out of them. The BZ-68 is trying to pressure, but he has no support. And there's only so much he can do to pretend that he has support. Because the moment they start pushing him and they see nothing back there, they're going to overcommit and kill him. So you've gone to this position. You do a smart play here, I believe. Yes, so a bad play here would be to rotate out this way because you don't know what's in the back. If you rotate out this way, you might get shot by a camping TD back here, so very good for you to go safely on the left side, and this allows you to poke on this left end to shoot this angle right here, or even shoot the bridge crossing. And now that Super Conks are crossing the north, you can actually get shots on him. You commit to the water, which does ruin the shot opportunity here a little bit. You do try going for that shot. That was the best shot possible, so, you know, it was a very well-made shot given the circumstances. You're going to aim for a VK. I would not wait here for too long. The enemy has just won the bridge, and they just killed the BZ. If you wait too long here, there's a risk that they're going to cross the bridge, sit on top of you, and just shoot you, right? Right up to the top right of your screen right here, right? That's very dangerous. And you can see the issue there, right? Your team sort of didn't need you on the south. You didn't really do anything. You just rotated a vehicle that could have had its firepower used somewhere else, right? Punishing bridge, you know, it would have been very, very useful in this case. Now, one interesting thing about the development here is your north is going to collapse. The 215B is going to die. He has no HP left, right? There's not many strong hold down positions, and if they are, 215B is not really great. There's a weak spot on the side you can pen. So they're going to eventually break this with a VK, a Super Conk, and a Centurion 7-1. So you going back north is the right play. That's going to be the collapse. Going to C4 is an option, right? Some players would go here. The main reason why I wouldn't do that is you're going to potentially get pushed by 2 vehicles. You obviously know by the Super Conk if they're going to cross bridge, but if they do get spotted by Super Conk, he can't shoot them anyways. So two full HP tanks can possibly push into you and just kill you. Very risky to take C4. It's better to bait them into your team. So the only real play here you have here is B2. Play hold down on the cap circle and punish this long lane the enemy has across from A5 right to A3. Your south position is not going to win. It's going to stall at best, and that is probably very good for you because if they stall, you have an advantage. And the reason is you have a Manticore covering the hill, right? He's able to spot that hill, see if there's anything up there. You have a Super Conk going water, which means you have a very nice anchor piece holding this center together, which means they're not going to get flanked. An IS-7 with a southern crossfire with an M103 and E75 covering him. So they can't be pushed easily on south, right? The enemy will not play aggressively against that. In other words, you have a defensive advantage, right? And the enemy has a defensive advantage because if you push into a JPE, SHAR, or RHM, right, there's a chance the UDES are just going to camp, hold down on that path and just shoot you in the side. So you can't push into that. And there's also a possibility in the last minute where you were blind that the UDES were able to cross back and climb their hill. Now, a Manticore should be able to spot that, but this is assuming the worst case scenario that they now have 3 positions, right? The forward position, the bridge position, and the hill, right? A forward anchor and 2 crossfire positions. So you should not be attacking south. Your team should be holding it. It is very imperative that you hold because you have the defensive advantage on the south, on the middle, and soon to be the north if you go to B2 to defend. Now the key read here is if your team wants to play south and play aggressive, they need to only do so when the UDES are spotted, right? Both of them. So your IS-7 platoon mate charges towards the enemy team, and he dies. That is very, very bad because that just turned a draw on the south into a slow defeat. Your team no longer has the firepower or the crossfire to actually hold south. The M103, E75, and the Manticore are eventually going to die, and the super conch is now too occupied to rotate, right? So he's stuck here. So this is all you have on the south holding it. They don't have a crossfire because M103 and E75 are holding the same corner, and I don't think one of them is going to rotate around to get to J6 where the IS-7 previously was. And if they push the Manticore, there's no support, right? The heavies are trapped on this corner. The enemy has line of sight on that, and none of them are rotating over to H3 or H4. And nobody is supporting from E3, right? So the south, if you read this, it's a slow defeat, but it is going to be lost at some point. All you have to do now is make sure you don't mess up north, which just requires you to punish them at E5 or A5 when they push through. It's fine to be aggressive here. You want to get information because at this point you're at a disadvantage, a severe one in terms of position and tanks. Good punish. You want to be poking every time you're loaded because at this point you can't afford to let them get close. Superconch gets a very nice shot on you. Gonna make sure you pen this, he gets tracked, and you finish the kill. There's no point in pushing north. You just spotted their two slowest tanks. If there were any tanks that were supporting them, they would have come ahead of time. So you don't want to overcommit to A5 just to see nothing, especially because you're not going to push through. You want to wait to the enemy to get closer to you, you counter push and catch them in the A5, A6 trap, rather than running them down from A6 all the way down to D7, right? So you do see this, you see the Leo PTA getting aggressive, you have an UDES support, so you can obviously counter push because at this point in time, they should be around A5 at the very end here, right around here. You should go left on this corner, this corpse. Very good shot. I believe that was a little lucky because that was aimed at the 2 and 5E, but slight latency allowed it to go a little bit to the right of the corpse. You took a shot. He has nowhere to back up, so you want to just be aggressive now. He has no cover. You out-reload him. So make sure you don't miss. Very, very good shot. Now you immediately rotate back. There's no point poking that EBR 90, and the reason is if he just saw his two tanks die, you have two choices. If you poke out the edge over there, right? If you poke this, he could just run away, and you're getting useless information. You already know he's there, so there's no point in checking that he's there again. And if he's over here running towards you, he would have run towards you anyways, and you would have just gotten shots as you ran back. So it's an unnecessary play. It's very efficient to go back immediately because they're going to start pressuring your base with the Char, the UDES, the RHM, the other UDES, right? There's a lot of firepower, especially fast firepower, that can easily take C2, and you want to punish that as quick as possible, especially because it's STRV and G-Store isolated. The UDES on top of the hill won't be able to react quick enough or have the gun depression. So far, I haven't seen any significant misplays aside from that one misrotation at the very beginning. So your team's punishing them. Very, very good. The enemy is scared to push. I would not go to the top of the hill. You don't have the gun depression to deal with that. I would not commit either. I would stay where you are and play hold down. At this point, one of the best plays you can do here is stay hold down here, right? You have a G-source spotting, so you don't have to be super aggressive in holding this angle, but most importantly, I would be poking with my turret over this hill, spotting behind me. The EBR-90 hasn't been spotted in front of you. He should be in front of you about now in terms of timing, but you never know if there's going to be a flank that's going to occur from the EBR-90, so you want to be having your turret spotted here, but ready to drive forward immediately to go hold down to shoot this with the G-source spotting. So you don't want to be in a completely blind spot here, right? You want to actually be controlling information back here. So you do shoot the UDES, and you're wary of the tanks that may be behind you, so it's very, very good. So the EBR-90 is behind you. He is firing standard AP rounds. At this point, I wouldn't bother staying on the low ground. There's two plays you have here, and let me go over both of them. They're pushing through this way, right? The JP, if he hugs the lower ground area, that's fine. If a G-Sword shoots him, he's going to die immediately, so don't expect this guy to punish too greatly, especially because he can't kill the JPE, which is your biggest threat. You can hold this position, which is hold down. You can see the terrain, right? You can be hold down here. The main problem with this spot is the JPE can push over, act as an anchor, eat 2 to 3 shots from a G-Sword, Udes, and yourself, right? And that's going to be a lot of firepower, and they still have more firepower coming up to kill you. And because of that, you're relying too much on your team to punish a JPE. So this is very, very bad because it's a position that's reliant on everyone focusing a single tank. And on top of this, if the enemy does trap you here in slow play, because you're focused on all the vehicles in front of you, you know the EBR behind you can eventually take this outer corner here, right, that's hold down here, and he can just punish you over and over again. You're completely exposed to him. So a safer play is to pull up to the hill, right, force them all to this little road path, right, this little hold down area here, and then you can punish them in a straight line. And if the EBR wants to push across the ice road to shoot you, he's just grouping up with the rest of the team, and this limits the engagement area. So you don't have the gun depression, but if you back up, there's positions on the side of this mountain you can use that will give you line of sight. You got very lucky that the JPE was actually aiming at your not platoon mate, but this teammate here. I mean, he just fired, so you can take advantage of that, right? It's going to be about 20 seconds, so you have plenty of time. You can fire 2 complete shots at him. Udes on your team charges in. Fire at the medium tank that fires faster. So it's a very, very good target switch there. You could have killed the JPE there, but you want to go for the tank that can reload faster, right? You know you can out-reload a JPE. Nice shot. You're going to rush the Udes 16. Very good picks. At this point, you want to make sure you don't miss this shot. He just flipped his tank a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time to readjust. You're also driving down the hill at full speed, right? So he's still going to be reeling from aiming at your turret, and if he's auto-aiming, it's going to take a little bit. So you have a split second to aim at his hull. And the reason why you don't want to rush this is you know he just fired. If you rush a shot and miss, he'll just hit you, right? And you just shoot him anyways because you out-reload him. If you take too long to aim this one in, he's going to hit you. So your only chance of making this a winning trade is if he doesn't hit you in return. So you want to make this shot connect as quick as possible, but if you just rush it, you're not going to have any chance. So auto-aiming here is bad. You want to be manually aiming at his hull as quick as possible, right? So you auto-aim, rush down the hill, and that sort of is not good. He pens you. That's very bad. You shoot him, you keep your front towards the EBR and survive for that reason. You want to keep your front to him, you want to stay with your back against the mountain. So you can see in that situation how that was a little unfortunate. You really did not want to rush that shot if possible, because that would have saved you another 360 HP. One big thing to take out of this is the EBR is using AP, and he's trying to trade with a conk GC, which is not good for him. The EBR is driving down the hill. At this point, you should actually be pushing him. And the reason is if you push him on top of this hill is he'll see this. He knows you're spotted. You can hug this left side and spot. You have the skill that lets you see if the Arty is shooting at you. And because you're going to be very slow, you'll actually know if Arty has clicked on you. Right? Because the way the skill works is if they click on you, the indicator shows up. So very, very good use here. If you go up this hill, left side, minimize the exposure. If they already shoots you, because of the travel time, you can immediately run to the rock here, right? Cut here into the rock, and you should be safe. And if he leads shots, you could just stop, right? You could just stop randomly. But the reason why you want to be on top of the hill is it has line of sight over the F2 line over here. You'll be able to see him running away and shoot him. You have line of sight over the middle path, right? He's obviously not going to be fast enough to get away any of these paths before you get to the top. And that's another shot. He can cross bridge. It's hard to see with this camera angle. I'll see if I can make that happen. So he can cross bridge like this, but if you sit on top of here, you actually see him right here and shoot him. So his only escape is to either hug this rock, which is a trap. You can just slowly whittle him down, playing this corner and pushing him. He can fall down the bridge, which is not the greatest play. Or if he sees you climbing up, he can run down this lower path back towards your team. and at which point you rotate, counter push off the hill, and you trap him. So that is the ideal play that would unfold here, where you bait him back into your team rather than letting him escape. So the big goal here is to stop him from running away, controlling that information, right? You have the information advantage, you have the firepower advantage. You don't want that information to run away from you and then give the enemy the spotting control. So you opt to go back, you're still lit, he's reacting to it, he sees you go down the hill, and now he's going to run away. So you can see the benefit of going to the top of the hill. It's riskier with Artie, but you can, leverage your sound detection skill, right? The one that gives you the Artie indicator, to your advantage here. The big problem is this tank can get to your side and pen you. He can't pen you at the front with his APCR round, but if he gets to your side, he will. So what you're doing is you're hugging right next to a wall, which is very, very smart. But unfortunately, with his speed, he has a very good advantage here. Now, I do like that you take this position. Some players, I would personally sit on top of the hill. It's a little better defensively because you know he's only going to come from one angle, but it's bad against artillery. So the only two plays here is you can play this position you played earlier where you spot this line. It's very dangerous to play this because the distance from this corner to this holding defensive position is very close. So he can easily run up next to you and just shoot you, and you don't have much time to react, right? The amount of squares here is very, very minimal. Whereas here, the alternative, you have a bit more playroom, right? You spot them all the way out in A5. They have to cross basically 3 grid squares to get to you, whereas the other one, they just cross 1 grid square. Now, you're doing a very smart play. You're angling out right here. Very, very smart. I like that. And in case anybody wants to know why this is very smart, if you angled out versus angling in, right? There's two plays you can have here. Essentially, you're side scraping, and the expected line of sight and engagement is going to be at this angle. So your two plays is to angle to the left or angle to the right. Now, in terms of effectiveness, right, based on armor thickness and calculations, it's going to be about the same. If you angle this much degrees to the left and you versus angle this much degrees to the right, it's going to be the same armor effectiveness. But the difference is going to be how the engagement unfolds after that first shot. The big concern here is the EBR gets on your side. So if he goes here and you engage on this corner, you want to make it so you can counteract his speed. If you're aiming to the right, you're going to turn that extra angle, right? This is about 90 degrees. You have to turn an extra 90 degrees to rotate back this way as he's driving across here to get to your side. Whereas if you're aiming this way with the exact same armor thickness, you're already angled in this position, right? And if he's driving in front of you, you can hold your tank closer to him much sooner, right? You're not at that 90-degree deficit. So very, very good. And even considering the fast rotation of medium tanks, this is about 2 seconds for a medium tank to rotate that much. So you're leveraging that difference, right? By just beginning pre-angled. Now, the unfortunate part there, I will note, is you are holding this spot, but you have to remember there is a small bush here and a small bush here. It's a double bush situation. He could be right here. He could be right there and you won't even see him because you just look through 2 bushes. So if you wanted to play this out a little better, you could have been 1 area forward right here, right? You still got a little nice cubby, right? And a little cubby to hide here, right? A little cubby here. This is just 1 little bit forward, but instead of spotting through 2 bushes, you're spotting through 1 because you're in this one, spotting through this. And these are crappy bushes. So you can see a tank over here by sitting in here looking through this mini one, right? So this is a small like micro position, but it's a much stronger position to use. And I think this is the big mistake because if he's out here, you're completely screwed. So the EBR was behind you. Fortunately, the timing was such that when you climbed up, right, you had this rock appear and he has no line of sight. You got very lucky there. And you definitely would have spotted him with that micro position difference. Now you're going back to shoot him. You want to make the shot count. He just fired. He's overexposed to your hull down and you rush it a little bit. But he's not running away, which means you can re-poke and re-engage him. Just make sure you don't miss. You got a good reconnect. Nice. And now you want to be, again, poking and trying to engage him. Very good. You got a little bit lucky that he didn't bother trying to run away, but that first shot missing is bad because, you know, in another engagement, it could have been that you missed that shot, you shoot him that second time we saw, but then he runs away because he definitely could have escaped in those 7 seconds that you were reloading. Now, at the end, you have 5 minutes to capture an artillery piece. Now, there's several ways to play this. You can cut across the lake, which is one of the fastest plays you can make. It gets you quick and loose information on the K6 pathway down here on the mountain. It lets you spot to J3 as you cross, or J4 if you go too shallow. But most of all, it gets you to their cap very quickly, while also giving you information on this southwestern corner. Going bridge is a little bit safer than that play, but you completely exclude this southern control. Going the mountain path is also a possibility, but the big concern about the mountain path is, in the off chance that he is there, he would get the shotgun advantage because of the bush positions he has. He can sit in some bushes on the hill at like G0. There's like some bushes you can sit in, very odd. He could be on E0, very unlikely, but that is possible. So it is a little bit risky, but once you get to their base, it's relatively safe. The main problem with the zero line play though is if he's on top of the hill, he has an advantage because he can shotgun you by aiming down the hill. So that is a big worry. So it does have its problems. The safest play is to slowly spot at the southwest corner going down the 1-2 line, then going across the K line. And you can do this with a 5-minute timer. The main problem with that though is, even if you do this as quick as possible, assuming you throw caution to the wind with this push, you're going to only have about 30 seconds once you get to their base to do everything else. Spot corners, take hill, so it's going to be very tight timing, but it is the safest route. And I say that you're going to have 30 seconds from experience based on the speed of this vehicle. If you had turbo, you probably would have bought yourself maybe an extra 10 seconds here. If you go extremely quickly, you might increase that time you have left to spot. I would not even bother spotting this. I would not even bother shooting. The odds of an artillery piece being aggressive here is very, very low. There's really no point in spotting that. It's just wasted speed, wasted time. Ideally, you want your artillery piece to be charging across the lake so he can meet up with you to capture base. And the main reason is, if the artillery piece is camping their base, you can have him as a meat shield, right? Take a hit and you kill the artillery piece, or you take a hit and he kills the artillery piece, with not guaranteed, but it is better than the alternative, and it gives you a much higher chance of winning. Whereas if he's playing defensive at D2 waiting for a punish against a camper, it's not going to work in your favor because he's so far back. So if you go together, it's like a win-win play. But if you separate like this, it's not good because the best case scenario is you win, the worst case scenario is a draw. So I would not recommend this play. If I were you, I would try pinging that conch, telling him to rush cap with you, because he's definitely fast enough to get into cap in time. You are clearing this out. You are hugging a little bit to the left, which is very good because if the artillery piece is here, you want to be next to hard cover. So very, very good. You're hugging at least one side, right? You're not sitting in the middle taking wide turns. So this is the risky part here. Most likely they're not going to be on the hill, but they could be on the pathway onto your right. So you want to be careful here. So nobody on the hill. You cross to the other side, which is very good. The main concern is sometimes there's artillery piece right here, and sometimes there's one right here, right? There's some cheeky plays here where they're double bushed and you can't see that, and they can shotgun you. So usually if you make this cross, you want to be a little bit wider here, right? Get as much hold down position as you can. Take the mountainside here, hug this, so if you did get lit, it's something right here, right? Or something right here. Now it's up to you to spot this K0 corner. You're very wary about that. That's very smart. Blind firing is a bit risky here, but sometimes you may want to blind fire to see if you're spotted, because if you shoot, your camo goes to basically nothing, and this may give you enough information to get lit to know he's there. And if he didn't spot you in the first place, then once you drop lights, this means you have an opportunity to engage. But alternatively, if you don't want to go for that information trade, you can try to creep up on top of the hill, see if he's up there, right? You always want to be worried that they're on K0. You never want to make the assumption that they're not there. So you're just being double careful here. There's no point slowing down now. You want to go full speed up. Because at this point, you just want to assume K0 can't spot you, right? So it's an information negative, right? They can't see you. You can't see them, right? So the best and worst case scenario is the same. Nothing happens to you. So you want to be rushing. Because again, you're playing against the timer right now. You always want to leave cap options open. Now, I think you make a mistake here. Again, another micro position mistake. You go to the left. I would have gone to the right. At this point, you want to be spotting through this bush, because the way this bush is positioned, you can climb into it, sit up, and immediately do U-turn. And what this does is you spot the ridgeline up here just in case there's a artillery piece sitting up here, right? There's not much positions you can use here. There's like one bush here, so you can spot him through that. And then you can immediately back off, right? And if you were so inclined to do a spotting trade just in case he's up here, you drive up a little bit and immediately turn back. So it's a small position difference, but it gives you more control, because right now you're a little bit blind to certain positions right here. And then you're doing an unnecessary push onto the top of the mountain. I guess you're trying to proxy this. I wouldn't even bother with that. Very, very good. The timing is very, very close. That small positional difference may have hurt you. You get in cap at 141. Okay, this is huge, because you need 100 seconds to cap out. That's 1 minute 40. And you need a little bit more, because the cap out doesn't actually go through at 100 seconds. It goes through at 100 exclamation mark, right? And you just got it at 141. And that's a little tidbit a lot of players don't know. You don't need 100 seconds. You need 100 plus a little bit, because it's 99, 100, 100. I do not know why the game does that, but you need that little bit. And you just got it. So you have the capper's advantage. So at this point, you have two choices. You're either going to hunt down artillery, right, and throw the cap option out the window, or you're going to cap out safely. And there's a certain way to cap out safely here that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. And it's to play this left side, because you're moving away from it. But there's a left side position right here. You want to be using this bush to your advantage, right? And the main reason is, if you think he's in K0, which you're obviously constantly looking at, you want to be in a position where you're using a bush to force him to drive towards you. So there's two plays you can make. You can use either this bush out here by sitting a little more exposed in this position, or you can try to use this bush over here by sitting in a more aggressive position right here, right? And the main reason is you want to always have something between you and them. You should be able to spot through these bushes, and that means you're removing that camo advantage they can get from it. And this means they have to hunt you down. You make a big mistake right here. And the reason is, if he is here, he has just spotted you. The position back here that he can use only has one bush, right? He's too close to the front line to actually hide safely here, but it's enough where he's just looking through one bush and he can see you and shoot you here. If he's over here, again, there's line of sight right here, and there's line of sight right here. So when you drive across from this left bush over here, between this gap, right, he can see you if he's right here. There's not enough bushes to block you and him. So he could be here, you can't see him, but he can see you, right? There's a bush in front, and there's one he's sitting in right now. So if he is here, you're in a lot of trouble, and it's possibly the biggest throw ever. Oh my god. You're absolutely dead. You don't know where he is. He has the advantage on you. You're gonna die in probably a few seconds because he's most likely pre-aiming this side, right? The artillery piece in this position is most likely pre-aiming this corner right here. So the fact that you got lit here, pretty much right next to his line of sight, right, where he's aiming, you're going to be hit. and knowing that this is about 3 seconds after you get spotted, it's going to happen within the next, and you're dead. And that is possibly one of the biggest throws I have seen. And let's see where he is. He is overexposed on top of the hill behind one bush, right? He's in a bush, but there is one bush in front of him. So he's double bushed to you. So very, very unfortunate. You drove in front of his line of sight. Not here, actually. I'm pretty sure he can't see you here, but he could see you here when you drove up on the right side of this bush. This left side was actually safe because there's a bush here, and there's like a bunch of random trees and foliage here, so you were actually safe in this line of sight. It's when you overexpose to the right to try hunting him down. And now Artie, as I said before, is not going to have the shell travel time to actually punish him. So, the enemy Artie is hunting you down. As I said before, this was a win-draw situation where the best case scenario is you win, the worst case is a draw because you die. With the enemy hunting you down, the Kong GC has very few options. One of his big plays here is to actually climb the hill and play like aiming down the hill to shoot the Artie, because the Bat Artie is actually fast enough if he goes bridge to go G7, right, up the 7 line across bridge, then across the C line into your cap. If he goes lake, I don't think he's fast enough, but the bridge definitely is. So your team's plays can't be one looking at the C2 position and preparing to shoot him, or climbing on the hill playing for a draw. So let's see. So your Artie piece is actually aiming in the right spot. No, he's not. So I'm just going to critique this. Do you see the way he's angled? And do you see how he's hiding behind the tree? He's not actually in the tree. There's no camo he's getting from this. So if you're playing artillery here and you're trying to play this, you know he's not going to go mountain pass, because again, I just said he's going to go bridge, or even lake. I'm not sure about the timing of that one, but bridge for sure. You want to be here, a little bit to the right, where you're actually in the tree, using that as camo, because you can see he's overexposed. And the worst part is if you look at the angle of his gun, right, you can see right here, it's like this, right? It's going across the shadow here. His line of sight is right here. That is very, very bad, because the enemy is going to approach from here. So you want to be sitting back here and aiming here at this angle where you're actually going to see him, rather than sitting here exposed looking here when they spot you over here. So this is going to be an advantage for the enemy Artie, funny enough. Despite being in a defensive position, he's using camouflage incorrectly. He's not in the tree, and he's going to actually be off aim against a Bat Chat, and he's using his max arc. So if the Bat Chat is here and stops, he's going to have to rotate his entire tank, get the bloom penalty, while the Bat Chat already can have his turret pre-aimed this side, and it's not going to be too good for you. So that Kong GC really needs to leverage the camo. In this case, camo is more important, because in a situation where you're playing defensive, spotting the enemy before you do is really valuable. Spotting them late is not. And spotting them at the same time is whoever gets the shot first. And it's obvious he did not get the shot in time. So that ended up being a massive defeat. So just a quick run through that game. I felt like the south rotation was unnecessary. You played well after that, though. The crossing from south to mid was a little bit risky, especially knowing that the Udas were on bridge. But crossing north, playing B2 safely, very smart. And I can't really see many mistakes. You played the north well. You played the A line almost perfectly. I would say you made a few mistakes on micro positioning against EBR90 and a small micro position error playing their hill, but the micro position on the hill at the end game was only going to buy you a few seconds, maybe like 5 seconds at best. But this end game was definitely the biggest blunder, trying to hunt down artillery without commander vision system. So let's quickly go over this. There's a little additional information here. So if you just want to quickly draw the bushes, I'll try my best to show you what I mean, right? Let's see if I can get this correct. So there's a bush right here, which we can obviously see. It's the one further south that I was talking about. There's a massive bush right here, right? There's a clump of bushes here. It looks very weird in this because this is obviously upscaled, but there's like, the way the bushes here are designed is they're in clumps, right? So it's not just one or two bushes, it's several chains of bushes. So in a defensive play like this, the enemy obviously, right, has a lot of bushes. In fact, so many that when you're trying to see them, they're most likely double bushed, right? Especially the enemy artillery piece that can either be here, right? We're going to draw the hypothetical positions here and the hypothetical position over here. But let's be a little bit more generous and say that they were playing this almost perfectly and they're sitting in the bush, right? So they get the camo advantage of being technically hidden by a bush, but they don't get the penalty of trying to spot through it. And let's go over with the enemy positions, because you cleared out several good positions, right? You cleared out this path, right, this entire area, so you know they're not going to be here. You climbed up the hill, right, so you know they're not going to be here. You actually poked over the hill very smartly around this position, so you know for a fact that you didn't get lit and you didn't see them, that they're not going to be up here, right? So very, very good. So the only two real plays the enemy has available to them is going to be a flank on the north, which requires them to crest over the hill because Abacha already has no gun depression, or the south camp. And the play and the position I said you should have taken was a position like this, right? And most importantly is to look where you expect the enemy already. And the reason is you can leverage these bushes here, right? You can use this bush to cut off line of sight, or if you were using the secondary position that I was highlighting earlier, a little bit closer to this bush. This cap circle isn't exactly correct, but you'll get what I mean here, right? This is also a secondary position where you're using this longer bush to cover an entire side, right here. And the main reason is, in a situation where the enemy's back here, you're trying to spot through one layer of bushes, two layers of bushes, right? Or the secondary position, one layer of bushes, two layer of bushes. So you'll never be able to spot them because you're getting the max 80% camo from two bushes. And they have their personal camo. So you have to be basically 60 meters if they don't have 20% camo, right? It's very, very close. And this distance is obviously more than 60 meters. It's more than proxy, right? By a pretty noticeable margin. However, if they're in one bush, they can spot in front of the one in front of them, right? Because they're not looking through two bushes, which is why I drew it this way. So their line of sight is going to be through this gap that I mentioned earlier, and through this gap over here, or if they're back here, they can get this, right? So obviously, if they're in the furthest south position, you don't want to overexpose to that, right? So I'll probably draw that as a different color so you can see what I mean. So you can see like this, but that south-south position can only see this line of sight here. So clearly overcommitting to this further south position here was very, very bad for you because you basically gave a free engagement to them if they were the furthest position. And the reason why you want to be using these bushes here is if you're using one bush to your advantage like this, he has a drive towards you, right? And if he gets to this position, you're spotting through one bush, he's spotting through one bush, you'll trade spot times, but you have the advantage of being pre-aimed, right? He's moving, and artillery has significantly worse bloom combined with his poor gun depression, meaning he'll most likely just shoot your turret if he does fire or even catch your gun. So it's not the greatest engagement, but it's favorable. And if he does try to blind fire, you actually know and you can counter push and hunt him by taking a very aggressive bush position through the bushes over here, getting to proxy range and getting artillery to support. And if he does flank you, you can easily rotate your hull and your turret and turn around like this, because again, in order for him to actually shoot you, he has to crest the hill with his bad gun depression and aim at you. So you have an easy 2 to 3 second advantage to get that to happen. And if you rotate both your turret and your hull, using your V-stab, right, to leverage the bad gun dispersion values, you're still going to out-aim him. So he has to RNG this shot. So this is the one way you could have played the end game and leveraged a stronger win condition and put a more or higher pressure draw condition on the enemy team, right? It puts the enemy on the actual defensive, right? They have to hunt you down, turning that defensive into an offensive, right? You're turning their camp into an attack because they have to move out. So it was a very unfortunate end game. You played to his strengths when you should have used the cap advantage, right, in your favor. Now what you did was fine if you had no time, but again, a safer play that would have done the exact same thing and allowed your artillery to help would have been a drive through here. Or if you want to be super safe, you drive out this way and you hug the mountain path here so he has a drive towards you, right? And if you need to, you can also hug a little bit like through the rocks here and proxy him, and he has a drive all the way around to you. So there were safe plays at the end there. I think you chose the worst one, but that's that. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed that, that was a little bit new tidbit, including MSP, which some people have enjoyed on my streams. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you like more of that, please let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.